Here's a video that I've been wanting to put together for a little while now. This is my top 10 most memorable picks plus one. So follow as we go from 10 to 1 of the top motorcycle picks that I've ever encountered. Not the best motorcycles, the most memorable picks. You're going to see stuff that you're not going to believe, like barn find bikes, farmyard bikes, a bike on a pole, a bike in a tree. I'm not kidding, in a tree. And you're going to see where we get some of these bikes, including this one and that one. Let's stay tuned. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Wait till you see which one I think is my most memorable pick.
Number 11, 1960s Ducati in a tree.
So this was a Ducati, I believe it was a 60cc bike that was put in a tree by the former owners over top of their fire pit, mostly as a decoration. I got the call. I had to have it. I had to save it. And it's now in the possession of another collector who's going to restore it back to its former glory.
Number 10, Royal Enfield 350 in the garage for 50 years.
This one I got a call on from another friend of mine whose father had it for over 50 years. It sat in this garage. It only had 1,119 miles on it. And sometime in the 90s or late 80s, they pulled the barrel and head off to upgrade it to a 500cc motor from a 350. And then the barrel and head got lost and the bike has never run again. This is an original paint bike. So we're going to get this bike up and running once again.
Number 9, 1935 Francis Barnett on a pole.
I got a call from another friend. This bike was sitting on a pole for over 20 years. He was in our Antique Motorcycle Club of Manitoba. And he knew my interest in the bike was always to save it. And I had already found another Francis Barnett on a riverbank only a couple miles from my house. So I had to have it, and it was a little bit of a process getting it down, and a little bit rougher than I had hoped after sitting outside for so long. But hey, we saved it. Up on the shelf, that is the 1935 Francis Barnett, and a second one up there. One was found on a pool. One was found on a riverbank about 3 miles away. Here are a couple of Francis Barnett cruiser motors. One came with the project that was on the pole, and the other I had found through another collector. It's got a couple of Albion transmissions. I believe those are 4 speeds. That's over here. And you can see how the bottom cradle of the frame is what holds the motor. The rest of the frame is actually stamped steel. It's quite amazing. And these were made, or they were designed for women because everything was covered. The fenders were all covered. The engine was covered so that they wouldn't get covered in oil or dirt or any other debris.
Number 8, 1936 Yard Art Indian Chief.
I got the lead for this 1936 Indian Chief from another friend, and this was outside of a guy's house for 20 plus years. And I got it because I promised it would get back on the road. And at this point, I had found a motor and extra parts. But at one point, I decided to pass this along to another builder, another collector, and he is now in the process of restoring this and getting this back on the road.
Number 7, 1943 Harley WLC parts pile.
I got the lead on this bike through another friend. And what was amazing about this one was it was only 2 miles away from my house. And I had no idea that this bike was actually just sitting there in pieces in the guy's garage. It had been taken apart many, many years ago. Some questionable upgrades on it, including the Japanese gas caps over the original caps of the gas tank, but we'll put all that back to stock in the future. The idea with this bike is to, in the future, restore it back to military trim, WLC, Canadian military, and I've got some parts already for it, and we just keep finding parts and adding to it. 45 cubic inch, 750cc, all Harley. This is the parts pile, 1943 WLC, kind of reassembled, but with military fenders for a future military build. Okay.
Number 6, 1948 Harley WL45 Farmyard burnt bike.
I got this 1948 Harley from a friend who had gotten it from a farmer whose barn had burnt, and this Harley was in it. He then pushed it out into the field and only called my buddy after one of his cows had cut himself on this carcass of an old motorcycle. Here is the gas tank for the 48 WL. You can still see the 1 neutral, 2, 3 shifter gate. This is the later shifter gate. This is the 47 to 50 speedball emblem mount. It still has the petcock in it, the fuel rod, sorry. But you can see she's pretty pitted. Doesn't mean it can't be fixed. It's just, is it worth fixing? That is the frame on that bike that we found in the farmyard that was burnt. It will get used again.
Number 5, barn find 1949 famous James that was in a fire.
A fellow actually answered one of my ads. I was looking for old Villiers bikes, and about 6 months into it, he called me, and it happened to be the coldest day of the year, middle of winter, minus 35, and I went down. We pulled this bike out of the loft, and it was restored at one point, and then it burnt in a fire. We ended up going to a farmyard and picking up more Villiers that he had, and we pulled them out with a snowmobile. We threw all the parts on an old inner tube for a tractor, pulled them behind the snowmobile back to my truck. That was quite a day.
Number 4, barn find original paint James.
I got the lead on this bike. This is an original paint, barn find 98cc James, that had been sitting in the barn for close to 50 years. It actually turned kind of pink from sitting outside and getting a little bit of sun over the years. I managed to hand rub all the paint, brought it down to the frame, and rebuilt it back up. And I'm very happy with this bike. It's the original paint. It's such a beautiful thing. Around Winnipeg area, there's a lot of these little Jameses because they were sold through Northwest Cycle in the 40s and 50s and 60s. My father actually rode one back in the 50s.
Number 3, Farmyard 1910 to 1914 Flanders 4.
I got this bike. It actually turned up. It was only about 5 miles away from my house. It had been sitting there since about 1955 when the previous owner got it from his father or grandfather. And at that point, it already had the motor taken out. It was probably used to run a water pump. But this is a very rare bike. There's only about 275 made and only about 25 left known to exist. And it took a bit of work, but we found a bunch of parts using a metal detector and a backhoe. And it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun. And it's one of a kind. Pieces for the Flanders. We got a new copper tank built. Here's your cam cover. engine plates. Here's your right side of the cases. Flanders Manufacturing Company, Pontiac, Michigan, USA. There's the other half, needs some work. Here's the barrel, needs some fin repair, but it's 110 years old and it exists, and we have parts of one. It's rough, but it exists. There's the seat we pulled out of the ground. That's what it should look like. There's another picture.
Number 2, Norton 16H and Atlas pile of parts.
I got the lead on this one. This one was a lot of fun. So this guy, Kevin, he actually was standing on the roof of his house. When I got there, I never met him, and he said, this is where we start. And we started pulling parts for motorcycles out of the roof of his house, out of the garage, out of sheds, out of a spare bedroom. And out of all this stuff, I managed to restore a 1968 Norton Atlas out of the parts. And it was the beginnings of our 1916 or 1940 Norton 16H. There were also a couple of P11s and another Norton Atlas that are in the hands of other collectors in order to get them back onto the road and running. That's one of the things that we strive for here is, you know, saving the rust, saving these bikes, getting them back out onto the road. Check out our video on our Norton Atlas and you'll see how it started and to what it is today. 750cc British bike back on the road. Getting that motor from that Norton pile is what led to this bike getting assembled over the last 10 years.
Number 1, Canadian Joe's 1940 WLDR.
There's so much that can be said about this entire pick and this bike, but it is an iconic motorcycle shop in Winnipeg. This bike was hidden for close to 50 years in the back of it, almost as almost like it didn't exist anymore. It was kind of like this legend. And I was lucky enough to get the chance to buy it and preserve it and save it. Save the history. And hopefully get it back onto the track one day and race it, oval track style. This bike actually was in oval track, dirt track, hill climb. It was in TT scrambles. It actually even went uphill, like winter hill climb. Got to see it. Check out the video on it. It's a rare bike, one of only 87 ever made. That's a 1940 Harley WLDR, 750cc.
Bonus pick, 1942 Harley WLC and new old stock parts.
This was our latest find. It was a 1942 Harley WLC Canadian model and a pile of new old stock 80 years old military Harley parts. New old stock frame, front fender, rear seat, springer, just a pile of parts. It's unbelievable that this stuff still exists 80 years later. I was lucky enough to do this trip with my kid, Waylon, who's 9 years old, and he did very well on a 2,000-mile trip across Western Canada. It's so rare nowadays to find these parts, you know, in this condition, in this state, unused, brand new, that warranted the ride, the trip out there. I hope you stuck around and watched all 10 plus 1 of our most memorable picks. This is was a tough one to put together because you don't realize how many good picks you've had, how many cool parts you've found, how many cool bikes you've come across until you have to put it into a top 10. And I count myself lucky. I count myself lucky that I was able to have these experiences that I was able to find such cool bikes with such incredible history, and almost all of them were just an hour away. And this just goes to show that there are stuff out there. Look for it. And how do you find these old bikes? I'll give you a little lesson. Ride them. Enjoy them. You know, people want people to take on these bikes. Why? Because you actually enjoy them. You actually ride them. You actually have fun with them. You build them. You know, look at these bikes. These aren't just to sit there. Those are future builds. This is what we do. This is who we are. We are Save the Rust. And I hope you follow us, subscribe, and comment. Tell me what one was your favorite. Which one couldn't you believe if you didn't see the pictures? To me, it would have been the Ducati in the tree. But it's also the Flanders. Maybe it was the Harley. I mean, there's just so many. One of the things I want to say is I'm so happy I get to do this with my kid. He's been on so many of my picks. He gets to play with these bikes. He gets to enjoy them. He gets to ride on them. And you're going to see a lot more of that, because that's it's not just me. It's Waylon too. So, you know, tell your friends. See if anyone else wants to watch this kind of stuff, because this is who we are. We're Save the Rust. Have a great day.